If you already own an X-T10 or you're looking at buying an X-T10, this video might be right for you. Hi, I'm Billy of the Fuji Guys, and I'm going to run through some of the top features that the X-T10 has to offer. Let's check those out now. If you're looking for a simple way to take photos with the X-T10, why not try the automatic mode? All you have to do is flip this switch to the auto mode, and the camera is going to ignore both the shutter speeds and the aperture on your camera and adjust the exposure accordingly to the scene that you're shooting with. It's going to automatically detect the scene, whether it's a landscape shot, whether it's a portrait, and if it is a portrait, it uses things like face detection to determine the proper exposure for the subject in the scene, as well as the focusing for that subject. And if the subject's backlit, it's going to know that. It's going to fire the flash as well. Of course, you're going to have the flash up and ready to go when you need to do that. It also does things like close-up shots, so that it's going to adjust the focusing so that you can get macro shots, whether it's taking pictures of crayons or flowers. You can get properly exposed and in focus shots by setting it to that mode. Now, if you want to manually set the exposures yourself or the scenes itself, you can use the command dial and change to the various scenes that are built in, like portrait, landscape, sports, and even night modes. There's even a dedicated fireworks mode that adjusts both the aperture, the shutter speed, and the sensitivity of the camera to give you the perfect fireworks picture. Of course, you probably want to use a tripod when shooting in that particular mode. There's also other different modes that adjust the color balance and ensures that you get the best possible photos in those type of scenes. But if, again, you want this to be a true point-and-shoot experience, just leave it on the advanced SR auto mode, and the camera is going to do all the work for you. The X-T10 offers several ways to compose your photos. You can use the LCD on the back of the camera to focus and take the picture. You can tilt the LCD upwards so that you can shoot in low angles, or you can even tilt the LCD down so that you can shoot above crowds. So it could be quite useful. If you don't want to use the LCD, you can take the viewfinder right to your eyes, and it should switch it automatically to the electronic viewfinder on the top, showing you the exact same information that the LCD does show you. There's a built-in eye sensor, as you can see, that just switches automatically. If you wanted to use the LCD or the EVF only, you can push the view mode one time, and it switches it to the EVF only option, okay? Pushing the view mode again puts it onto the LCD only option, so if I stick it to my eyes, it shouldn't switch. This might be useful in certain situations where there's shadows and you want to use the LCD screen, but the shadows causing a little coverage over the eye sensor, and it's switching to the EVF automatically when you don't want to do that. So that's probably when you want to use the LCD only option. There's also another mode that's basically a power save mode, and as you can see, both the EVF and the LCD is completely off until you stick your eyes to the viewfinder. As you can see there, it switches on automatically, and as I take it off, it turns off again. If I wanted to review images, I still could, and by pushing the playback button, it should show up on the LCD on the back, but also the eye sensor still continues to work when I stick it to my eyes, and I can see the image on top of the electronic viewfinder as well. So again, this is a very useful mode when you want to conserve battery life, and it's one of my favorite modes for shooting in the field. The X-T10 offers various autofocus modes, which makes it easier to focus on your subject. On the front of the camera, you have the front command dial that you can push inwards, and it becomes a button, and it allows you to quickly change the various autofocus modes. You have the single point autofocus, the zone focusing, and you have a wide/tracking autofocusing option. Let me show you the single point, which is the standard focusing point for the camera. It's set to the center. You push halfway down to lock the subject and all the way down to take the photo. Now, if you wanted to move the focus point around, you could by pushing down on the directional pad, and you could move it to the 49 different autofocus points, as you can see right there. And if I want to set it to the corner, now your subject's over focused on the left-hand side, and you can take the picture. If you want to resize the focus point, you could too by using the command dial. So you can rotate the command dial to the right to make it bigger, and rotate it to the left to make it smaller. If you push inwards on the command dial, it resets it to the original size. The smaller that you change the autofocus points, it's going to make it more accurate to focus, but it's also going to be much slower. So you want to leave it not too small. Of course, if you make it very large, again, the focusing is going to speed up by allowing it to detect various items within that area to focus on, but it might not be as accurate again. So if you want to reset it, you can push it to the back. Now, if you want to move it to the center portion of the screen, as you can see here, you notice there's 9 different plus signs in white. And those are the phase detection portions of the camera. So if you move outside of this area, you won't be using phase detection, which means it's going to be set to the contrast base, and it's going to be a little bit slower, as you can see. And if I set it to the phase detection area, should make it a little bit faster. Of course, in good lighting, contrast and phase detection works quite well. Now, changing the different focusing modes to the zone focusing option, now you can see you have a bigger zone area. If I push the button halfway down, it's going to look for areas of highest contrast. It's going to try to cover all that in one shot. So if I just isolate a subject here, you can see it's trying to see the different focusing that it's doing. Now, if I wanted to, of course, change the size of the zone, I could by pushing down, and I could rotate the command dial so that it's a square zone or it's a smaller box. And again, you know, in here is your phase detection pixels. So if you go outside and beyond that, you no longer are using phase detection, and it might get a little slower, especially if you want to track moving subjects. So I recommend you try to keep that within the phase detection pixels within that center, and you can change the frames to how you want the coverage to be at. In this instance, I have it on the center as default. Now, if I change the autofocus mode again, it's going down to the wide tracking, it's now going to determine the whole scene. So it's going to look through the whole scene, not just in the center. It's going to determine areas of highest contrast in which that it can focus on. So depending on the scene situation that you're shooting with, if you're trying to track subjects that are very wide, it might be better to set it to this wide tracking option. But if you want to isolate the focusing on the subject, then you can set it to the zone area where a lot of subjects are grouped together. And if you want to be exact in terms of autofocus, then you would use the autofocus points, the single point, to ensure that the subject or the camera is focusing on the subject that you're aiming the focus points towards. And that's the 3 different autofocus options on the X-T10. The X-T10 offers 3 different ways to adjust focusing. You have basically a single autofocus mechanism where the button's pushed halfway down and it pre-focuses and all the way down to take the photo. You got the manual focus mode that uses the focus ring in the front to adjust the focusing. And of course, you can use focusing aids like the color peaking that changes and highlights the areas of highest contrast with a unique color like red or blue. And of course, you got this continuous autofocus, and this is great for tracking moving subjects. So in this situation here, you would push the button halfway down and keep that focus halfway down, and then you just follow the subject in the scene, and the camera's going to automatically adjust the focusing to follow that subject wherever they go. And as you can see here, it's going to constantly adjust focus and makes it easier to take the picture of moving subjects. Now, in combination of that, you can change the AF modes to things like the zone tracking mode, and in conjunction with the continuous focusing option, you can now hold the button halfway down and it will constantly track that subject, as you can see right here. So the subject goes to the left of the focusing point or to the right. It's going to try to follow that subject. So again, making it a lot easier for you to ensure that moving subjects are in focus. And when you take the picture, your picture should be quite nice and in focus properly with the camera. So that's just a unique 3 points of focusing options with the X-T10 from manual, continuous, and single autofocus. If you want to shoot in manual modes on the camera, it's very, very simple to do with Fuji cameras, especially the X-T10. You got your shutter speed dial that's on the top. Right now it's on the A, which means the camera's going to determine the shutter speed for you. Also, the aperture on the camera is also set to A as well, so it's going to control both the shutter speeds and aperture. But once I change the dial on the top off of the A, now it's on basically shutter speed controls, shutter speed priority, and depending on the shutter speeds I choose, the camera's going to choose the appropriate aperture settings accordingly to my exposure. So again, if I change it, my aperture should change accordingly. Now I put the aperture on A, and I use my command dial here. I can rotate the apertures, and now I can set it to aperture priority by adjusting my apertures myself, and the camera is going to accordingly adjust the shutter speed here. It's 1/80th of a second. If I close the aperture down, it might use a much slower shutter speed, 1/60th of a second, as you can see. And if I completely take the shutter speed dial off of A, now the aperture is manual, the shutter speed is manual, and as you can see, the camera is not going to change exposures for me, so whatever I see there and I take the picture, it's going to come out dark. If I adjust the shutter speeds to be slower, as you can see, the exposure gets brighter and brighter and brighter until it comes to the proper brightness. I can take the photo, and that's how you would use the exposure settings on this camera. Of course, this doesn't have an aperture, but if the lens that you purchase for this camera does have an aperture ring on it, then of course you can manually adjust the apertures that way instead of using the command dial on the back of the camera. If you're looking to fire consecutive shots really quickly on your camera, and you don't want to obviously push the shutter button like this, which is called shutter mashing, then of course you can set the camera to one of the continuous shooting modes, either CL or CH. CL stands for continuous low. So if I hold down the shutter button all the way down, it shoots it at around, I think, 3 frames a second. And if I set it to the CH, it's going to shoot at a faster frame rate, up to about 8 frames a second, as you can see there. Now the camera does have a buffer in the camera to allow you to shoot, but as you can see, it writes off from the buffer onto the card, and once it's done, you can fire more shots. And once it hits the buffer, as you can see, it does slow down a little bit. And then again, it takes some time for it to clear the buffer. But as it clears the buffer, you can still continue to shoot pictures and stop and fire some more shots. So this is going to be good for capturing action shots. Now what you probably want to do in this mode too is to set the focusing to the continuous mode so that it constantly tracks the subject where the subject's coming towards you. And you can also be firing a bunch of shots as it's doing that, as you can see. That's going to help ensure that you capture fast-moving subjects within the scene. You can also pan along if the subject's moving across. You can kind of like do something like that and track the subject that way. And that's how you can use the continuous shooting on the X-T10. A great feature on the X-T10, of course, is the Wi-Fi capabilities to connect it directly to a smart device and to control it from your smart device, whether it's using iOS or Android. Of course, you connect to the camera via the Wi-Fi settings, and you would open up your camera remote option here and select the remote control option. It's going to allow me now to see exactly what the camera's seeing on the back of my phone. Of course, you can use things like touch focus to focus on a subject. You can also take a shot remotely using this software. Now, of course, you can also change different parameters on the camera and change things like film simulation mode, white balance, even put in a self timer if you wanted to do a shot where you're in it yourself. So you can push it and it's going to count down in 2 seconds, and of course take the picture. What's also nice about this software is that you can fully control the camera's shutter speeds, aperture, ISO, pretty much most of the settings. You can even do video. So if you switch it to the video option, you can also start recording video on the camera, and of course you can also stop the video as well. Now, after you've either taken photos or captured some videos with the camera, you can push the playback button on the remote app, and it shows up with all the images that are saved actually on the camera. So if I go through some of the images, I can actually touch the ones that I want and click on import, and it will actually import the images directly to my smartphone through the camera roll. And from there I can obviously share that images with anyone I want on my Facebook or even Twitter account. So again, if you go back out into your basically camera roll, you should be able to see your images are actually right there As you can see, shots right off the camera. So it's a great little feature to have with the built-in Wi-Fi, and it's quite useful for when you want to take group shots, or you want to put the camera on a unique shooting advantage or shooting angle, and you don't have direct access to it in order to take pictures. So you can do that through the remote camera app that the X-T10 is compatible with. Shooting with flash doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be shooting in the dark or in an indoor situation. Sometimes it's very useful for taking pictures of subjects that are backlit and you want to fill that subject in, and you can only do that with, of course, a flash. So the X-T10 does have a built-in flash that's located right here. We're going to flip the lever switch right here and the flash should pop up for us. And if we take the picture, as you can see here, it should nicely fill in the subject's face, and of course provide for proper exposure so that the subject's nice, bright and clear, but also the background is also nice and clear as well. Now there's different flash options on the camera. If we go into the menu here, we go down to where the flash option is. You can see that there's things like auto mode, which the camera will determine if it needs to flash. A forced flash, which means that the flash will fire no matter what the situation is. A slow synchro flash. So what this will do is that it will burst a flash out, but then it will keep a slower shutter speed so that it can capture more ambient lighting. This is good for taking pictures where the subject is in a low light situation where you do want to capture lighting from the background, but of course the subject needs to be standing very, very still in order to not be blurred. We have a second curtain sync flash, which means that the flash will fire just after the second the curtain closes instead of the first curtain. You have a commander mode, which means that the camera's not going to do a pre-flash. So if you have an external flash that can be optically triggered, you want to set the flash mode to the commander mode so that it doesn't trick the external flash to fire before the picture is actually being captured from the camera. And then you have the suppress mode. So even with the flash popped up, setting it to the suppress mode means that the flash will never ever fire. So that's some of the different options for flash photography with the X-T10. The camera offers various shooting modes via the drive dial. You got things like the ability to do bracketing modes. With the bracketing modes, you can shoot things like film simulation, dynamic range bracketing, white balance bracketing, even exposure bracketing. So if you want to set it to one stop here, it takes 3 pictures, one underexposed, overexposed, and one that's properly exposed. So you can see the underexposed, the overexposed, and the evenly exposed image. You also got things like advanced filter effects that allow you to do things like miniature effects, toy camera. Gives you a little bit of vignetting into the picture itself. And the great thing about the toy camera, of course, is that you see a live view of what you see before you even take the picture. So it really can come up with a really, really nice, cool features. There's also, within that, things like pop color, high key, low key, dynamic tones. There's even a soft focusing. There's even the ability to isolate certain colors from the scene so that only a certain color shows up and everything else becomes kind of monochrome. So that's kind of like the orange here. Everything is orange, everything else is basically a monochrome color. There's also a multi-exposure feature. It allows you to take basically 2 shots, and it allows you to compose it and merge it together, as you can see here. I can take another shot right there, and then if I'm happy with that, I can see that I've taken 2 shots and kind of merged it together. So it gives you a really cool effect on that. And of course, you got things like the panoramic mode that allows you to basically take a shot and it will automatically stitch the scene together. I'm not sure how well that's going to do for me there, but let's just take a look to see how that turned out. It seemed a little bit okay, but as you can see there, it's a little cut off once I kind of rotated it awkwardly. But again, a nice feature to have, and it's really accessed through the drive dial on the X-T10. So there you have it. If you want to learn more about this product, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at FujiGuys. Until then, I'm Billy of the Fuji Guys.